internet personality who's just as controversial but completely opposite in his music takes, his music taste, and his taste in Big Macs. And that's Big Mac a snack a diddler.
Those 3 Big Macs are for me. Them 2 big fries for me.
The internet and music as a whole had never really seen this type of debate-style show where two guys on the complete opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of perspective, experience, taste, etc. would go head-to-head to debate the current climate within hip-hop. And before the show kicked off, Joe gave his thoughts on what the vision or the goal for the show would be. He said, "Rap Twitter usually deals with things on a very surface level. We are going to peel the layers back. Academics is going to give me every single thought from a consumer perspective, and I'm going to crap on all of it, because I hate consumers." And that's exactly what Joe did on this show. If you watch tons of clips from the Everyday Struggle days, you realize how many of his takes aged amazingly, not just because he might have looked at things from a more mature lens than Snack a Diddler, but because he looked at things from an outside lens of the consumer, from someone who has lived and breathed the music industry and seen the best and worst aspects of it.
Stop reporting on streets. The streets will escalate to a point where
really good games like check out the exit speed of 100 miles per hour.
Take, for example, their 10-year anniversary debate on the massive sales battle between Kanye West and 50 Cent. The way Joe frames this, it actually has a lot of parallels to the beef between Kendrick Lamar and Drake. Academics is first up to give his thoughts on the sales battle between Kanye and 50, and he basically says this is like a passing of the torch moment. 50 Cent was dominating hip-hop at the time, but when Kanye West outsold him, it marked not just a shift in who was the biggest rapper in the game, but also the type of sounds and subject matter that was most dominant. 50 had that gangster persona, he was putting out singles like I Get Money. Meanwhile, Kanye West was putting out singles like Wait Till I Get My Money Right. Yeah, he was braggadocious in his own right, but he was the more vulnerable underdog in the situation. And his success at the top ushered in a much more introspective, emotional crop of artists, like a Drake, Kid Cudi, J. Cole, etc. And that sales battle was a pivotal moment in shifting the tides, right? That's, at least from a consumer perspective, what we would have thought of the entire thing. And that's what academics had said. But Joe Budden countered it to say that this was bigger than just two rappers going head-to-head and the consumers picking who they thought the top guy at the moment was. This was a calculated effort from the record label that owned both these two artists' catalogs. Universal Music Group, that label ring a bell. Joe says, look, he was sick of 50 Cent's antics, sick of his doing whatever he wanted and getting away with it because he was tired of these times. They manufactured this head-to-head and let Kanye West out on top of it. That at the time, they felt like they were in control. It sounds funny in 2005, but in 2007, Kanye West was the biggest artist compared to 50 Cent.
Every 4 or 5 years of music, the sound changes, right? When this was happening, we couldn't figure out why this was even a competition. Anybody with a brain could tell you that 50 was going to sell more. That was just the time in 2007. Kanye West was who he was. He wasn't this person yet. This was not a competition. This is label orchestrated. This is manufactured. This is Universal saying we have had enough of 50 Cent and his arrogance. We have had enough of this dominant man just kind of doing whatever he wanted to do, as it had to do with Universal slash Interscope. Now, Def Jam, Kanye West, they are Universal. 50, Interscope, they are Universal. Why would Universal make this humongous rollout marketing plan for
I didn't like that they dropped.
To feel exactly like you just said you felt. Kanye was making great music. This is when he made the jump. And from the jump, he never looked back. And from the jump, 50 wasn't able to progress in music.
And this really offers a much more in-depth look at the mechanics of the music industry and how these shifts in the sounds can feel natural to the everyday consumer, but really they're more calculated than ever. We saw the same thing play out in the battle between Drake and Kendrick, who, like 50 Cent and Kanye West, were both under UMG, just different record label divisions in that same label. With Kanye, he was under Def Jam, that was owned by Universal. 50 Cent was under Interscope, which was owned by Universal. And in this Kendrick and Drake beef, Kendrick was under Interscope, again owned by UMG, and Drake was under Republic, another record label owned by UMG. I study UMG for a living. We've gone through the situation a million times. The key factor to Drake's lawsuit against UMG was that he knew he was coming up to contract renegotiations with them. He just finished a $400 million contract, allegedly, and he felt like they purposely smeared him by putting the machine and all the resources behind Kendrick in that battle so that he would come out on top and the tides would turn in terms of who was the top guy. Now, I think in both cases, it was easy for both Kanye and Kendrick to come out as the underdog who won their respective battles because, frankly, they were both putting out the better music, right? Not like us, Euphoria, that was way better than any diss Drake released. Graduation was a way better album than 50 Cent's Curtis at the time. So because of that, it was very easy for the record labels to make this shift feel natural while manipulating who would be at the top for their own benefit. And this is something Joe Budden had said over 8 years ago today. And that's not all. We all know the infamous meltdown he had when Lil Yachty was a guest on the show. At the time, Yachty was hotter than ever with multi-million-dollar brand deals with massive companies like Nautica. He was gearing up to drop his debut album. And at the root of Joe's rage was him just being a concerned artist, telling another fellow artist to make sure he had his business in order for when all that hype died down. He was asking Yachty if he knew he was in a 360 deal, and Yachty didn't know, and that's what made Joe go over the edge.
Tell me what you want from hip-hop. You don't think that's a question you should answer at some point? Making music, bro, just how you earn. You're having a problem with just that. You don't sound like you're very aware of what's going on, and you're one of the hottest on earth. I want you to be aware of your business, know whether you're in a 360 or not. I want you to appreciate the culture that changed your life. I took you from college dorm rooms, eating all of the noodles.
Yes. But that rage was justified because that debut album that Yachty was gearing up to drop, it didn't perform so well. It sold around 40,000 copies in the first week, which was very underwhelming at the time. If Yachty's business wasn't in order, like Joe had been asking, he could have been stuck in a horrible contract, failing to recoup the advance that he received, forcing to pay back the labels for a long period of time. Take that from Joe Budden, who, similar to Lil Yachty, hotter than ever with his first single, Pump It Up, but failed to one-up the momentum he had early on in his career as the year progressed. And because of that, he saw an uglier side to the industry when an artist is stuck in limbo in a contract they don't want to be in. Again, he was giving these perspectives not as a consumer of the music, but instead as someone who's experienced the other side.
Is over, y'all.
But it wasn't just the business aspect of the music that Joe Budden had offered advice on and as a result predicted a lot of outcomes for. At the time, Academics was the voice of the next generation. The SoundCloud rappers, the mumble rappers, any rapper you would see on a Rolling Loud lineup in 2017. He was friends with them, he would stream with them, he'd post them on his Instagram page, and one of them who got himself into a lot of trouble was XXX Tentacion. One day on the Everyday Struggles show, Joe and Academics were reviewing a clip of XXX getting into an altercation with the Migos. And Joe, knowing how Academics operates, capitalizing off a lot of this controversy without carefully dissecting it and offering valuable advice that could help these people avoid the conflict instead of fueling it, Joe went on a very long rant about how when these guys get in trouble and Academics is commenting on it, he's directly responsible for fanning the flames, and therefore, whatever transpires from these conflicts, you could point a slight finger at Snap the Diddler. And beyond that, he sent out a grave warning to XXX that handling these fights the way he is, running to the internet to escalate the conflict without being connected to the proper protection, will leave him in a very compromised position.
When I watch these triple X kids, I hear yelling, this is snitching #1. We would never know a word about this if he didn't tell us. Migos get into this type of shit every other week. We never see a video. You know why? Because behind all of the young hip-hop people, some of them have OGs behind them, some of them don't. Know where Migos falls on this list? They do. Because he's going to get beat up in LA for some shit that he said. There is a street protocol, and if you are not a street, you should mind your listen, there's no OT to say. Knock off, relax. When that ass gets up in the head that way, you move.
And they feel like you profiting off posts and stuff like that financially and getting monetary gain. So like you're aiding, assisting the bullshit.
And sadly, what they discuss in this clip would parallel the series of events that transpired just about a year later that would tragically take the life of XXX. No security, walking around, not scared of any confrontation. It was Joe's exact words that would parallel a situation that took XXX's life. And there were countless other examples of Joe Budden predicting a multitude of things throughout his little tenure on the Everyday Struggles show. From making academics do 100 push-ups after he lost a bet that Kendrick would sell more than 500,000 copies in the first week with his album Damn at the time, to warning Chance the Rapper that he was deceiving his fans and would likely lose a lot of the love he had from the public if he continued fabricating his story and his music. Joe was clowning the extra soft, Charmin, Sesame Street type raps that Chance the Rapper was producing in 2017 after the massive success he had with his album Coloring Book. Chance was headed in a very family-friendly direction, which is okay and all, but you can't forget what his fans loved him for to begin with. That was the gritty, unpolished, immensely vulnerable raps that we saw on Acid Rap. But by late 2017, Chance had turned into this polished caricature of his former self. And on top of that, building his entire brand around the fact that he was independent when he wasn't truly fully that. And things hit a boiling point, and Joe's words were fully manifested into reality just about 2 years later when Chance the Rapper finally released his massive debut album, The Big Day, which basically became a meme of how jolly and happy he was for loving his wife, and was really looked at as one of the worst or biggest fumbles for a project of all time.
This is my comeback. Start yours today at purdueglobal.edu/dreamjob.
I want to know your deepest desire.
Okay.
The time run is aboard.
Get more for less with Tim Hortons $1, $2, $3 menu. Order any size beverage.
For Biloxi, Cody,
Oh, I love my wife. I love my wife. And all the criticisms fans had for that project were the exact same thing Joe had said 2 years prior when Chance was still on top of the world and there were only a few very small signs that this was the direction he may have been headed in.
Chance, from acid rap to now, his content it's different. Fans have noticed that. The difference in content and the marketing machine at work. I think I'm used by artists to negate the growing consensus amongst their core fans. Chance rapped the ABCs in a verse recently. That's what I mean. You are not independent. Stop saying it and stop responding to me every time I say it because I'm willing to prove my point.
But now you might be asking yourself, even though yes, Joe Budden turns into the poster child of a quote-unquote hater, all because of the words that he spoke on this show, which a lot of them would later become true. Ultimately, the show was a massive success, launching Smack a Diddler into a whole other stratosphere and allowing Joe Budden to successfully pivot from a retired rapper to a flourishing content creator. So you might think, at the time, it'd be the dumbest decision in the world to stop that ball from continuing to roll, right? Well, that's exactly what Joe did. About 8 months after the show had started, Joe Budden abruptly quit. The world was confused. Yeah, he had his podcast, but where the numbers were really being pulled in for him at the time was on Everyday Struggle. It'd be like Lil Wayne quitting rap after the Carter 3, or Kanye quitting after he just beat 50 Cent in that sales battle. It made no sense, but Joe was insistent on leading that show and taking full ownership of the content. The reasons for leaving after a measly 8 months were very similar. In an interview with Academics years later, he said, "You was right. I'm never going to sit there yelling and screaming at Joe. That's right. I've been homeless and I'll be fine. I'm fighting for complex to do the right thing in my life. Save the show. Think about how sweaty in those shows and how these deliver, and what it could potentially deliver if you ever got the ad side of the show right. Now think about what you would take. What I was thinking was the mic and sound support. I was thinking $90,000 a month, 90 a month after that. The next cycle, I wanted double. When my contract was up, I wanted $50,000 a month. They came back and said something like $40,000. I said, $40,000, they could have bumped it up, that $10,000 more.
DJ motherfucking
Obviously, that showed Joe that they had no interest in treating him as anything more than just an employee. So Joe completely rebuilt his platform, his own platform, from scratch. And by making the bold move of leaving that show at the height of its popularity, he really predicted the outcome of how both him and Academics' careers would go once they decided to finally go independent. Yeah, $50,000 a month is a big ask. And then you also got to pay Academics, the Deska, all the people who worked on the show. That was a lot of money for Complex to dish out. So think about 2025. Joe's own podcast right now is earning just on Patreon alone $1 million a month. And Everyday Struggle as a TV show has so much more potential than Joe's own podcast is. If they continue that run, think about how much money that show could bring in. Joe Budden was asking them for $50,000 a month. Now his own show is known to make $1 million a month just from one stream of income, the Patreon. By refusing to compromise and fighting for his ownership in the content he produced, Joe Budden would end up going from making around $19,000 a month off of Everyday Struggle to probably making anywhere from $300,000 to $500,000 a month after all expenses are covered for with his own Joe Budden podcast right now in 2025. His own Joe Budden podcast. And I really want you guys to put this into perspective. It's kind of interesting to think about the money side of all this stuff. I don't know how the Spotify numbers work. I mean, obviously his podcast is on there as well. I don't know what they pay out. But just off YouTube alone, the Joe Budden YouTube account is pulling in about 10 million views per month. That's around $100,000 in just ad revenue alone. Again, that's not off the sponsorship money they make, off the Patreon money they make, which is over $1 million a month allegedly. Think about the type of money Complex could have had if they kept Everyday Struggle on the air and just paid Joe Budden that $50,000 that he wanted per month. But the financial hardships wouldn't stop with Joe leaving Everyday Struggle. Leaving the show allowed Joe to put all his attention towards building up his own podcast, the Joe Budden Podcast with Rory and Mal. By 2018, the show was a massive success, which allowed them to enter an exclusive partnership deal with Spotify that reportedly paid them less than $2 million annually and granted Joe no ad revenue share or ownership stake in Spotify. And yeah, that's a good deal, right? I mean, he was asking Complex for $50,000 a month for Everyday Struggle. Now he's doing about $180,000 a month with Spotify. Great. But he's not making any money off the ads that are played on Spotify when you watch the podcast, and he has no actual ownership in the platform. So everything he's building up, he just gets a paycheck at the end of the day. It's a big paycheck, but a paycheck nonetheless. He's still kind of working almost as an employee under Spotify. So ultimately, by 2020, he exited his Spotify deal, stating that Spotify never actually cared about the podcast individually. They only cared about Joe Budden's contributions to the platform. AKA, Spotify didn't care about the podcast's growth, they didn't care about compensating the people on the podcast properly. They just cared about what having that podcast exclusively on Spotify meant to the actual growth of Spotify. And he also accused Spotify of pillaging the audience from the podcast, aka they just made the Joe Budden podcast to be on Spotify so that everyone who listened to the Joe Budden podcast would later go on to listen to other podcasts that were already on Spotify. They didn't have the best interest of Joe Budden or his work as a priority. And he said after countless negotiations with them, they refused any reasonable bonus structures for the members of the Joe Budden podcast and didn't offer them any ownership. So ultimately, he split up with them.
What does the partnership matter if they get paid in perpetuity off everything? You can't just stitch whatever you want into the feed whenever you feel like it.
Any kind of ad they wanted.
Anything they want at any time. Just plug it in. Y'all do what y'all do and then just give it to us. No. And come over YouTube. Give us all the deal. And don't show up nowhere else. They just asked for lives. Ours. We gonna figure out how to run this. It was a lot wrong. I don't lose a day of sleep saying no to that.
And you might be thinking, he's at the root of these problems, right? He's the one that keeps leaving these situations. But it's only when he realizes and ultimately predicts that his best interest is served when he goes independent. And of course, now again, he has 70,000 paying subscribers on Patreon, making the network, the Joe Budden Network, one of the highest earning creator-run podcasts on Patreon. And they're doing over $1 million a month. And it's that mentality Joe Budden had that would reflect into how a lot of other major podcasts would handle their business going forward. Snack and Diddler himself had a podcast with Spotify, but he ended up shifting his focus back onto his independently owned content platforms like his live streams, his Instagram channels, his Twitch, his YouTube, etc.
Those 3 Big Macs are for me.
Joe Rogan was the highest earner on Spotify, but even he's no longer exclusive on Spotify. The Joe Rogan Experience, his podcast, became exclusive to Spotify in 2020, where they renewed his contract in February of 2024, which was reportedly worth around $250 million. They removed the exclusivity clause, allowing him to distribute the podcast on other platforms as well, like YouTube and Apple Podcasts, allowing him to generate new forms of income from his own content and not be tied strictly to Spotify. And this shift reflects exactly what Joe Budden had warned about years earlier when he criticized Spotify's platform-first approach. Joe argued that locking creators into a single platform would limit their reach, undervalue their work, and ultimately prove unsustainable. His prediction has since played out across the industry. Aside from the biggest podcasts in the industry, the Joe Rogan podcast or Snack and Diddler's podcast, you also have shows like Last Podcast on the Left that left Spotify's exclusivity clause in 2021, and they cited how the model of keeping their content exclusive to Spotify hurt their growth and their monetization. There were other reports that revealed that some podcasts that were only exclusive on Spotify had lost more than 3/4 of their audience by only allowing listeners to hear it on Spotify. And as a result, Spotify themselves have now shifted away from that exclusivity model that they were working with in favor of broader distribution and ad revenue. In essence, they realize in the short term, yes, it might benefit the Spotify platform itself if they have all these massive podcasts that you can only hear on Spotify. But in the long term, all of these podcasts would now have smaller audiences because you could only listen to it on Spotify, which obviously wouldn't be in the best interest of the individual podcast themselves and would hurt Spotify down the road because these podcasts would have less of an impact, less of an audience. So in essence, Joe Budden's early criticisms of Spotify's ownership-heavy strategy very accurately foreshadowed the unraveling of the exclusivity model across the board for many major podcasts. So now we've seen Joe Budden critique artists, we've seen him critique major corporations like Spotify, but there was one, I don't even want to call him an artist, let's call him an entity, a massive entity that Joe Budden went at. When he first built up his podcast, it didn't even have a name at the time. He was calling the podcast, I'll name this podcast later. And the first major moment Joe had on his podcast that predicted the entire trajectory of Drake's career going forward was Joe's criticisms on Drake's album, Views. Back in 2016, Drake is fresh off his battle with Meek Mill, back to back. He was obviously the unanimous winner, but at what cost? Well, it left a little bit of a chink, or a massive chink, in his armor when it came to the fact that the entire world now knew he did not write his own raps. Now, this is a bit of a rabbit hole here, but stick with me. In my Quentin Miller documentary, now that we looked at that situation 10 years after it happened, I showed you guys how Drake was taking some subtle shots at Jay-Z all throughout that beef with Meek Mill. Once on the song Charged Up, where he said, I got me a deal with Apple and I still feel entitled, because of course Tidal was Jay-Z's streaming platform, which Drake rejected a deal with to instead sign with Apple Music, to which he was a pioneer in dropping the first Apple Music exclusive album, which was none other than Views, which Joe Budden was critiquing, but we'll get to that shortly. Drake also took shots at Jay-Z on the song 30 for 30, where he reflected on the Meek Mill beef, rapping, not really sure what more he expected when the higher-ups all come together as a collective with conspiracies to end my run and send me a message. Now, a couple of years after that song was released, Drake was reflecting on the beef in an interview, and again, I touched on this in depth in my Quentin Miller documentary. Maybe I'll leave a link for that in the description of this video, but in that interview, Drake had said that the reason why the Quentin Miller reference tracks ended up getting leaked out is not actually because of Meek Mill. While it was Meek Mill who premiered the diss tracks with Funkmaster Flex on the night that he released his diss track aimed at Drake, wanna know, it was actually, according to Drake, a quote-unquote higher up who had pressured DJ Drama into giving Meek Mill the reference tracks so he could release them on the same night that he put out his diss track against Drake, so that he would unanimously win this beef. Again, this is a bit of a rabbit hole, but Drake here is saying that DJ Drama was pressured by a higher-up who said, our guy Meek Mill is not looking too good for him right now. Back-to-back, he's destroying him, and we need something. We need those reference tracks that are sure to put the final nail in the coffin in this battle. And that's when DJ Drama ended up giving up the reference tracks, allegedly, right? Who could that higher-up be? Well, it was Meek Mill who was signed under Jay-Z's Rock Nation management company while this beef with Drake was going down. In the first diss track Drake released throughout the beef, again he references the fact that he still has love for his idols, but he's taking the high road and he still feels entitled, making reference to the deal with Tidal that he rejected, Jay-Z's deal. Jay-Z again is managing Meek Mill. Years later, Drake alludes to the fact that there was a quote-unquote higher-up who pressured DJ Drama to give Meek Mill the reference tracks to use when he was dissing Drake. The higher-ups conspiring to end his run and send him a message. Now, why is this all important? Well, because when Views came out, it was actually supposed to have a Jay-Z feature on the song Pop Style with Kanye West. When the album came out, that Jay-Z feature was nowhere to be found. And Joe Budden, amidst his critiques of the Views album, which we'll touch on, he also insinuates that there's a massive shift overall within the music business that's going down, and it involves both Drake and Jay-Z.
He's the point, I believe, that he was sent to distract that man Drake.
I think it was addressed on the 30 freestyle. You and I was the only two people at first that said 30 freestyle is not about me, that is about Jay-Z.
Yes, were you?
Joe couldn't put a finger on it just yet, because again, this information didn't come to light until years later. But Joe was sensing that there was some sort of rift there, and they were both battling to have a massive stake in the future of music, which would ultimately be streaming. Jay-Z kind of lost that battle because Tidal didn't end up becoming what he thought it would. Meanwhile, again, Drake made a successful deal with Apple Music and became the platform's highest streaming artist. Kanye West, months after this Joe Budden rant, would go on stage at one of his Life of Pablo tour stops and say that it was Jay-Z who removed both his own and Kanye's verse from Drake's album due to some beef between Meek Mill, Apple Music, and Tidal, pretty much confirming all the pieces to the puzzle of that quote-unquote higher-up that was conspiring to end Drake's run that he was insinuating, and the comments that Joe Budden would make when he was prefacing how he felt Drake sounded defeated and uninspired on that Views album.
His chord is bigger than that, because he, him, and Hov at the top. Whatever goes to are fighting about, whatever Drake told, and I'm gonna say Drake might be, whatever that the top of music know is coming, they're preparing for it. And if you love music, you better prepare for it. So there's a trickle-down effect occurring now.
So Joe Budden's already seen the signs and shifts of the industry, but ultimately it was his critiques of that Views album overall that I think would only resonate with Drake's music more and more as time progressed. For me, I was actually a big Drake fan before that album Views had dropped. Yes, it sucked to know that my favorite Drake project, If You're Reading This Is Too Late, was barely written by him, but I thought for the most part he put a lot of effort into the production, the introspection, the subject matter behind his projects, up until Views. For me, Views was the turning point. This is when I saw an artist compromise their artistic integrity in favor of a formula that would maximize their capital. It was ever since Views that we saw Drake go in this pop lane, dumb down his music more and more, devalue every single project he released afterwards, and what was it all for the sake of? The sake of getting those streaming numbers up. The more bloated the project, the bigger the track was, the more formulaic the song sounds, the more profits go right into his pocket. And at what cost? Not much, just your legacy.
I think that kid on that album that I heard sounds real uninspired. I think that music is real good. You can fool the people that are not paying attention. That music sounds good and I enjoy it. 40, you sound amazing. 40 continues to progress. Drake, you do not.
So you see how exactly what Joe's saying here would go on to pan out in terms of Drake's entire career, right? 40 would continue to progress on the production side. Drake would continue to regress in terms of lyricism, subject matter, and innovation as a whole. And Joe would emphasize that he missed the days where Drake would start the trends instead of being the one to hop on them.
I miss the Drake that starts the wave, not hop on other waves. And I'll say it again. I timeless Drake that pushes the
I don't like
not
that.
let the
Oh, I
agenda
don't like
push.
that, Shane.
Big difference between a Drake and a Hov while they both at the top. Tell me what you have learned about Drake from Take Care to now.
That man, don't say that shit, cause that man, his whole career, he basically been fucking with niggas, man.
So this was a really long-winded rant. Before the days of Joe being, I guess you could say, a more refined podcaster, his thoughts were kind of all over the place, but again, he predicts a lot of what we would see with Drake's career for the next 10 years after this podcast release. He's asking you important questions. What have you learned from Drake from Take Care up until the Views album? Absolutely nothing. For someone who was crowned the king of introspection, for someone who was wearing that crown that Joe Budden believed the last person before him wore was Jay-Z, he had very big shoes to fill, a very important voice to bring forward, and he used it to churn out a bunch of unenthusiastic, generic pop records for the sake of appeasing the industry. Again, like Joe had insinuated, there was a massive shift and battle going on between the higher-ups at these corporations, where Drake was at the forefront of, and it's possible because of the deals he took, he was forced to go in this lane, where he would again give us these 20-plus song projects year after year. Literally every year after he signed that Apple Music deal, we got a new Drake album, each one sounding more formulaic and less inspired than the last one, and each one having a larger track list than the last one, perfectly geared to running up the streaming numbers. And while Joe has been less harsh of his critiques on Views over the last few years, I guess based off how it's aged, what he says here resonates completely into what we saw Drake's career transpire into. He didn't become Jay-Z. He became a manufactured pop star. And I could do an entire video where we break down all the Joe Budden diss tracks that came after this, everything he predicted there, and everything he actually said. Jay-Z. 1 hour and a half monologue of a podcast that he did when Views just came out, because there was a lot of other things he predicted. He was questioning why Drake was so harsh on certain street rappers like Meek Mill, but then seemed to desperately cling on to Future sound, his lingo, his production, and everything that came with Future. Because again, Drake went from being the guy who started the waves to now having to hop on them and cling on to them.
When was Drake really starting waves, though? Shane, when was Drake actually starting waves, though?
Collaboration with 21 Savage after Not Like Us, you run through Atlanta when you need a check bounce.
And
he also emphasized how important Drake, Kendrick Lamar, and
shit, nigga, everybody loved him. Everybody loved him.
And comparing Drake continuously to Jay-Z.
No. Y'all see that? Y'all see that? We going 2 top 10 niggas going to get inspiration
in Drake's subject matter. How is he going to be a positive voice for the next generation? Not just in terms of the people listening to him and the message they take from his music, but also in terms of the blueprint he was building for the next crop of artists after him to model their careers after. Joe was emphasizing with the Jay-Z, even with all the pressures of being at the top, he never let that compromise the integrity of his art. With Drake, from one project to the next, everything became more watered down. And if you look at the landscape of his offsprings today, you can see that their music sounds just as uninspired as his did. That Views collaboration with Apple Music, the whole agenda of the streaming platforms as a whole, with Drake's Views album being at the forefront of that, or being the frontliner of that streaming movement, it's created a landscape where artists are incentivized to compromise lyricism in favor of half-baked melodies, viral TikTok sound bites, repetitive hooks, and bloated track lists. Joe Budden warned him in 2016, "You have the torch right now. Your voice is important. Everything you rapped about wanting on So Far Gone, you now have that. What are you going to do with that voice?" Now, of course, all these critiques led Drake to send a little subliminal Joe's way on the song No Shopping with French Montana. He rapped, "Pump It Up, I'm not a one-hit wonder, they know all my stuff." It's ironic because Joe is literally critiquing him not for being a worse artist than Joe, but actually being much greater than Joe and having a lot more potential than Joe ever
but he
did.
just poking in Joe's skin. That's just Drake poking in Joe's skin.
So everything Joe was critiquing,
he just like, hey,
Drake pretty much delusional.
You're not really a good rapper, nigga. You're a one-hit wonder.
And again, I could do a separate.
I'm a hit maker, nigga. They know me that shit.
From the Joe Budden and Drake beef.
More of a poking in the nigga's skin.
Like 4 massive diss tracks, ripping into every aspect of Drake, predicting a lot of what was to come from his career, a lot of questions that Pusha T and Kendrick would then go on to ask in their separate diss tracks against Drake, and really unravel this blueprint that all of Drake's albums use in the future of how to dissect the very character of this pop star. And the one thing I want to focus on, because again, we could do a separate video where we focus on the intricacies of Joe's diss tracks, but the one little critique that he had, remember when Kendrick rapped, "Let your core audience stomach that, then tell them where you get your apps from." yeah, that was Joe Budden predicting that entire thing.
So what
We'll take that. Now, in the case of Joe Budden and Drake, I think it's just going to be a rap battle or it's going to stay on wax. If it really is a rap battle, because you saw Drake actually send some shots and Joe Budden respond 3 times. Now, Joe Budden's actually added additional information because it seems like he's dying to get more responses out of Drake, and it seems that Drake is paying attention because Drake actually responded to what he said on the podcast. Now, Joe Budden is making a crazy accusation. It might be true, but it's an accusation about like your heart. Yeah. Now, listen, here's last this song. Go check out LateNightFreak.com. It's called Drake, but he mentioned something about Drake having or kind of changing himself to now have a sculpted stomach. Now I'm thinking, I don't know, maybe he's trying to say that Drake was better before he started working out. He's actually talking about Drake kind of get some surgery done to kind of erase back or somehow get a sculpted stomach. Now, Boss actually tweeted at Joe Budden and said, yo, why did Joe fire those shots at Drake's sculpted stomach? Why did you do that, Joe? Now Joe responded by saying because he saw Dr. Miami. They ain't even tell y'all hip-hop is weird now. There ain't no way a goddamn rapper would be going under the knife or going to get liposuction at Dr. Miami. That's really meant for Instagram. It's not no goddamn rapper. Another fan tweeted at him on another day, and they said, Joe, you're irrelevant when it comes to beefing with Drake. And Joe Budden responds, irrelevant rappers is better or are better than rappers who get lipo twice. Now, this is part of hip-hop I don't even want to go down.
Now, ultimately, what inspired me to do this video was actually a video by another creator who I highly suggest you guys check out. He's one of my favorite YouTubers right now. His channel is called Geek About It. I'm going to leave a link in the description of this video to his channel, but he did a video on how Joe Budden basically predicted Not Like Us and the entire beef between Drake and Kendrick, amongst several other things. And it made me go down a rabbit hole to realize there was a whole hell of a lot that Joe Budden had predicted, but I'd like to take a look at what he had to say with you guys, because Joe Budden really had the foresight to realize that this battle was bound to happen years before it actually did.
Kendrick, you can fool them, can't fool me, dog. Now what are y'all talking about? These ain't like us.
The Grammy goes to Not Like Us, Kendrick Lamar.
Like Nostradamus, Joe Budden has predicted oddly specific things that would happen in hip-hop years before they occurred.
I think if you hit Drake too hard, he's gonna cry.
Drake! He's going ahead and filed a lawsuit for Kendrick Lamar's Not Like Us.
Joe Budden's biggest I told you so moments came with the Kendrick Lamar and Drake beef. 3 years before the Like That verse, he had already called it.
I'm telling you something, I've been saying it for years. They have to address each other. They just don't really have why would they do it? Because you have to. The two niggas have to tell me a time and where it hasn't happened. Where the two dudes at the top don't talk to each other. They have to.
Not only did he predict that these two giants would eventually go head to head, he even described how it would happen and how Drake would be defeated.
Man, if Kendrick and Drake make us wait till 2030 to get whatever they about to do. Like y'all avoid each other because y'all operate in different spaces, but y'all keep bumping into each other artistically because y'all are that great. You cannot do it.
But at that point, it sounded like a stretch.
One down.
Kendrick, you can fool them, can't fool me, dog. Been in this game for years. You can't trick me, you such a student, dog.
He was convinced Kendrick still had that fire, that primal competitive instinct every real MC has.
It's a stone cold killer on the loose that been quiet for years. Kendrick can play on the stage if he wants. He is an animal, threat to society.
To everyone else, that ship had sailed, but Joe Budden didn't buy it.
I still don't see this head-to-head Armageddon that you keep trying to predict, you keep trying to will to happen. This is happening. Armageddon is here.
And what do you know? First-person shooter drops.
Y'all are never getting what you were talking about, that face-off. It's never happened. And Joe says only one person gotta get mad for this to happen.
And that person was Kendrick. What's funny is he had also warned them to never take their eyes off of him.
I don't know when he's coming, but I know he's inserting himself. He's inserting himself in this. And Drake, you better look at him. He's not coming to play with you. Hey, Cole, here's y'all.
And when you look back, it's insane how over the years, how many times Joe Budden kept emphasizing that this battle was absolutely inevitable. Even though the landscape seemed less competitive than ever, with Cole and Labre hugging on stage, Kendrick Lamar being quiet, on a hiatus, focusing more on developing Baby Keem, his cousin, as an artist, and his label PG Lang than actually releasing music of his own. When Joe Budden reacted to the Family Ties song between Baby Keem and Kendrick Lamar, He emphasized that whole sequence that Kendrick did, smoking on your top 5 tonight, that was him showing Drake, or at least warning Drake, that he was on the lookout. He was coming for that throne. When Drake and Cole did First Person Shooter, Joe was right there again, emphasizing how Kendrick must have been watching that.
I never thought that Kendrick and Drake would have ever like went at each other. I knew that Kendrick never really fucked with that nigga
battle in full effect with his verse on Like That was exactly what Joe Budden had been saying.
But I never really thought straight up that Drake would really go at it with him.
What's crazy is before Rapaholics was ever really a thing, about a month before, Kendrick Lamar had released his verse on Like That, proclaiming F the Big Three is just
feel me, like bro, it's like
Joe Budden podcast.
Kendrick can kill it though, like you know.
Screenshot of this comment.
Drake, he ain't trying to really go against no killers for real.
It's February 28th. 2024.
He gonna go against a nigga that he know he got the public side on. You know he got that side.
And whoever this guy is,
actually, he had a public side on Kendrick. He just Kendrick ain't better.
Cole is amazing, but there's levels to this. Nobody wants Kendrick Lamar to act up again. Enjoy the peace. Now, Joe Budden must have been talking about something related to Kendrick feeling away about First Person Shooter and J. Cole and Drake hugging and kissing on stage. Because what else would prompt this guy to comment this unless Joe Budden was already talking about how the beast in Kendrick Lamar, the boogeyman, was about to be awakened once again. And it just blows my mind that this comment was typed a month before Kendrick would shake up the entire game at levels we had never seen before, predicting all of this just a month before.
Up to Like That hit #1, Kanye and others started inserting themselves into the drama. Rick Ross dropped the diss track, and Kanye made a Like That remix.
Kanye never liked the my nigga. He never liked the Drake.
I did do this Like That remix though. I think that's what you was doing the remix. Let me see.
You know we had to get the hooligans up here and go take this. Yo, God, I got you.
And believe it or not, Joe predicted that too.
I need for Kanye to move out of the way. It's Kendrick Drake. Kanye move. Justin LeBoy move. You guys have to stop.
Before Kendrick even responded to anything Drake said, Joe had already called his next move. He'd go up to that one thing Drake couldn't defend, the uncomfortable rumors that have followed him for years.
No, I'm tired of it telling me to shut the fuck up. Every time I'm telling you where some killer consciousness brain is gonna go if you keep playing with it. That Bobby Joe, whatever that little girl name is, weird.
I love him. You know, we just texted each other the other day. He was like, I miss you so much. I was like, I miss you more.
I think if you hit Drake too hard, he's gonna cry. Drake is bringing legal action.
Oh, well, why y'all keep on doing that shit?
Lamar's track not like
Like, nigga, it would have been came out if that nigga was fucking with a little ass kid, bro. Like, this is fucking Drake, bro. Stop doing that shit. Like, I think that shit is a big ass excuse to just basically just trying to get a up on the nigga, bro. Oh, boy, you don't think straight up a motherfucker under 18 is gonna say some shit?
Joe casually
It's Drake, bro. It's Drake.
For 4 years before it ever existed. Almost like a prophecy.
Oh, that shit, nigga.
Such a student, though. Now, what are y'all talking about? These ain't like us? How? Hold on, bro.
Well struck.
How?
Back there.
So, I mean, yeah, from the disses that Kendrick Lamar reviews, not just the ones that Joe said on his podcast, like, hey, when you hit Drake, you're going to end up talking about that Millie Bobby Brown stuff. That's going to be too hard for him. He won't know how to take it. But Joe also gave Kendrick a bunch of ammo from his own diss tracks against Drake 10 years prior, when he was talking about the Lipo, talking about the Ghostwriters, talking about the Obi Ho sweatshop and Party Next Door, getting his record stolen by Drake. He predicted Drake suing. He predicted J. Cole dropping out of the battle. And the craziest part of all is, before Kendrick Lamar ever even responded to First Person Shooter, Joe Budden was critiquing the very album that First Person Shooter was on, For All the Dogs, saying that Drake needs to start hanging around women his own age. Leave these younger women alone. The exact ammo Kendrick Lamar would use in the biggest diss record off this battle. The very same thing that Drake would egg Kendrick on to talk about in Taylor Made Freestyle, rapping, talk about him liking young girls, that's a gift for me. But where did he hear that from? I heard it on the Budden podcast. It's gotta be true. Drake knew that these shots were coming from an opponent who knew him the best and studied the game to the highest degree. Joe Budden, whose words, whether they were from 2024 all the way back to 2015, had trickled down to predict the exact series of events that we'd see play out all across the music industry. Whether it was business deals, rap beefs, or just music as a whole, Joe Budden's analytical sense of thinking, stripping the consumer aspect out of his thought process, out of his approach, out of his predictions, and instead, speaking like a calculated industry insider, had foreshadowed some of the most insane moments we've seen in music over the last decade. Well, let me know what you guys think, and I'll catch you in the next one. I study rockaholics for a living.
Babyface, heel. Babyface, heel. Babyface, heel. Good guy, bad guy. Life is so much easier when we're able to boil things down to black and white. Rarely do things ever stay this simple. In March of 2025, John Cena, one of the most respected babyfaces in the history of wrestling, and a person who's devoted 20 plus years to giving to the business, the man who never gives up, finally gave up on us. But it's what followed this earth-shattering heel turn that calls into question the foundations of professional wrestling, and it's the very thing that inspired this video. Because over the next few months, what was meant to be this historic feud between the top babyface of today and Cody Rhodes and one of the greatest workers in WWE's history, finally feeding into his darkest thoughts, instead became so muddled and poorly executed that the crowd not only began to root against the babyface, but cheer for the heel. Additionally, the WrestleMania match it culminated in was so ill-conceived that it led to a debate of whether Cena and Cody, two very solid wrestlers, had a boring match on purpose. After all, Cena wanted to ruin wrestling. And that's where I come in, because I'm going to skip all the way down to where that conversation leads if you took out all the dilly-dallying and personal things you have to endure when having a simple conversation like this over dinner. Because at the end of all things is a conversation, a question that gets to the very root of this thing I love, called professional wrestling. Do the roles of babyface and heel still matter today? Or have we all become desensitized to the conventions of storytelling in favor of standing our fate simply because of their looks or their aura? Let's start at the beginning. I hear that's a pretty good place to start. What qualifies a babyface and a heel? Well, the easiest way to define it is that the good guys are babyfaces and the bad guys are heels. Well, thanks for watching, and please consider subscribing. Well, throughout the 60s, 70s, and early 80s, it really was that simple. You had your lying, cheating, and stealing chicken shit heels like Ric Flair, Bobby Heenan, fighting against your white meat baby faces. Your Ricky Steamboats, the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, your Hulk Hogan's. The heels get ahead by breaking the rules, leading us to cheer for the underdog baby face as they rally.
The challenger fighting back.
If the heels say that you're the city you live in is a piece of trash in the middle of nowhere.
But you know, the people in Harrisonburg is just like the rest of Virginia. They tend to beat up on their wives and girlfriends and old ladies, and besides that, I understand that there has been some intermarriage in that family. That's why I'm on the case.
Now the baby face is talking about how much each and every one of the fans mean to them.
The world's heavyweight title belongs to these people. I'm gonna reach out right now. I want you at home to know my hand is touching your hand for this gathering of the biggest body of people in this country, in this universe, all over the world now. Reaching out because the love that was given me, and this time I will repay you now.
And that worked for quite a while because keep in mind at the time, wrestling was simply carnival circus acting. People were coming in week after week to see the characters develop, or when you moved the wrestler picked up. They were simply there to cheer on the good guy and boo the bad guy. But as the Reagan era American nationalism in the 1980s started to cement itself, we started to see wrestling evolve.
When you play violence, do you choose the only one with all natural colors,
it's so time consuming, bro. And then it's like, it'd be so hard when it's spaghetti.
Suddenly started to embody 80s.
Like, that's the hardest one to like clean. It's the hardest one to clean, bro.
And proclaim to kids all over the country to say
that's why it's hurting me so bad. It's hurting me so bad, bro. I honestly don't want to do it.
Where it really starts to get interesting is on the heel side of things, where people are defined by how they
you gotta be in the mood to clean that type of spaghetti shit, bro. That shit, bro, it be all over the pot.
Or because they portrayed xenophobic stereotypes like, for example, the Iron Sheik, Mr. Fuji, or Yokozuna. Japanese sumo wrestling. These characters were complicated, Their biggest moments had nothing to do with morality.
You will go to
It was all just spectacle. Despite all this, you had wrestlers that portrayed actual characters that filled in different shades of the spectrum, that would go on to certain archetypes we developed along the way. For example, Andre the Giant as the monster heel, or the sadistic hero in Jake the Snake Roberts. As the 90s rolled around, the lines between the babyface and heel got even more complicated. Are you ready? Hey, thank you.
We'll get some coding change, but we gon' say we like an hour and 30 minutes, man.
Punk rock,
10 o'clock.
grunge, and gangster rap entered the
We
mainstream.
can go,
Kids
man.
were raised on divorce, hard times, and cable TV. Reality shows like The Real World, Judge Judy, and TV, and Jerry Springer started to blur the lines between what is real and what was
a little time.
determined. Maybe most importantly,
I get the Cody right now, man. I want to smash and go to sleep.
The rise of the internet established a widespread cynicism.
I gotta get
and
up and edit.
competitions to corporations.
I need to
There's
at
one
least
thing
about
about wrestling is that it
15
often
smoking
reflects
shit
the world
like that.
around us. One of the biggest indicators of wrestling
I go to
response
sleep
to
about
this
10,
is
30,
getting
11 o'clock, man. Because I know I
much
can get up and do my
romanticized
thing.
Attitude Era. And who might you ask sparked the Attitude Era? Well,
Back in this last day.
kayfabe and shows got two words for you. Suck it!
The audacity! The audacity of these Generation X!
DX represented the anti-authority punk rock. If the music's too loud, then you're too old mindset that felt cool at the time. So it felt right that it would be led by two of the most frustrating talents to deal with backstage. I'm talking about Triple H and Shawn Michaels. Talented? Yes. Backstage politicians? Also yes. Perfect spearheads for what would become the most rebellious and profitable era of wrestling? Yeah. Put DX just 10 years prior, and people would be absolutely appalled. But instead you have a whole crowd of people saying suck it and doing crotch shots to authority figures. Let me know in the comments if you've ever gotten in trouble paying tribute to DX. But it wasn't the Generation X that started the concept of the whole idea. That credit goes to pioneers like Ric Flair, Roddy Piper, and Razor Ramon. However, there's one group that changed the fundamental principle of 90s wrestling, that quote-unquote heels don't sell merch. It's a weird rule, I know, but this is where wrestling becomes an exercise in psychology. See, I'm of the opinion that professional wrestling is the most unique medium of art out there. Movies and television are scripted out months in advance and never tell a story that explores.
I don't know about the new generation, Shane, but he was so much back in the day.
Wrestling is
Like, I will say, like, shit.
from storytelling and real-time improvisation.
I always wanted rated R superstar shirt.
Your whole story on the dime. To use some Hitchcockian imagery,
I wanted Randy Orton shirts.
a slow
You ain't fuck with them shirts? Like, you didn't want that shit?
Wrestling is this type of back because oftentimes you know where it's going, but all it takes is one to the left, one wrong lean to the right, a little where you be that way, and all of a sudden things can go very wrong. Which brings us right back to the shirt. See, as a result of the spontaneity of wrestling, try to control as many variables as you can. For example, you have your baby face be as visible, accessible to the fan as possible. Meanwhile, you have your heel, reject the fans. And a good heel takes it a step further by preparing for the scenario where people start to gravitate towards it. Try to minimize the damage, which means keeping the people cheering for you to a minimum, the fans wearing your merch to a minimum, any sort of positive reinforcement for the heel to a minimum.
And I got on the elevator, the guy got on the elevator with this little kid, and he's like, hey, Tracy, can you sign for my little kid? And I remember just staring right ahead. Watch the numbers. 1, 2, hey, can you sign for my kid? 3, hey, look, hey, Jerry, you're not gonna look at me? And I was like, I'm not looking at this guy. I'm not fucking looking at him. Because if I sign for his kid, when I go into the yard, he's gonna be going, oh, you're cool, Jerry, but he signed for my kid. I want this guy to tell everybody, this motherfucker didn't sign for my kid. Elevator open, and I walked out, and he's like, hey, Jericho, go suck your ass. And then you're like, yeah, Jerry, this is great. I got 200 people that already here before I walk out.
Wait, what was I talking about here? Oh yeah, right. In 1996, the hierarchy of pro wrestling was changed forever, when the wrestler formerly known as Razor Ramon walked onto the set of a rival company, WCW. followed by another WWF wrestler, Diesel. Together, they teamed up as outsiders trying to take over the company. This was a big deal, as for one of the very first times, a wrestling show used the audience's knowledge of behind the scenes of wrestling, which in this case being Diesel and Razor Ramon's contract disputes, and using that to make the show feel unpredictable, as if the WWF was actually invading the alternative product. Then finally, in 1996's Bash at the Beach, Hell froze over as the golden hero of the 80s turned heel.
Is he the third man? What the hell is going on here? He is a third man. Look at this picture. Oh my God. What the hell is going on? Oh my God.
Joining the faction known as the NWO, thus giving birth to the concept of cool heel. The fighter does and says despicable things. However, when all they do is win, you can't help but admire them. He became a power fantasy. This was his story because up to this point, those were designed to elevate the heroic babyface. But now, the villain was the show. The heel faction was big business, the business. NWO was met with raucous success. Meanwhile, the WWF was on its back foot, desperately trying to find a response. The result was someone who did more than anyone for the business of wrestling. Maybe the exception of one other person, we'll get to them in a bit. But right now, let's talk about the face of the Attitude Era, Stone Cold Steve Austin. Blue-collar, beer-drinking, middle-finger flipping Texas rattlesnake. He cheated, ambushed, lied, insulted, and laughed at whatever stood in his way. And yet, people cheered for him everywhere he went, becoming wrestling's biggest star as he crossed the 2000s. Suddenly, it was no longer him to be square, or to be vulnerable, or to be good. Why? Well, he fulfilled the fantasy of creating chaos, the same way NWO did. However, he wasn't painted as the villain. That role belonged to Vince McMahon, who we would later find out filled the role both on and off screen. It was Stone Cold Steve Austin that allowed us to feel what it'd be like to flip off our boss, to hose him down with beer, to obnoxiously scream, what, whenever somebody was just annoying the hell out of us. At the end of the day, why did people cheer for Stone Cold? Well, because Stone Cold said so. And maybe that's the evolution of baby faces up to this point. Instead of simply being action figures that we thought was cool, characters that really took off during the Attitude Era were characters that were able to do everything that we wanted to do. You had the likes of Mick Foley, the everyman that was still able to hang with the best, the Hardy Boys, the Daredevils. Or the smooth-talking man rocking $1 million shirts that just couldn't seem to get out of the kitchen. The Attitude Era's main appeal was rooted in providing wish fulfillment, an outlet for people, primarily young men, to project themselves onto these anti-authority, rebellious figures. When you program people to reject the corporation, what happens next? What happens when the edginess goes so over the top that it tips over the cliffside? How do you bring it back in? Well, remember I mentioned one other person that did so much for the business of wrestling, and funny enough, also happened to do as much when it comes to breaking babyface heel connections. Well, I was referring to Jonathan Felix Siegel, a prototype, Dr. Thugonomics, franchise, missing hustle, loyalty, and respect. We all know the story by now. On the verge of being cut, John Cena began to freestyle in the back of a bus to Stephanie McMahon, which provided the first kernel of John Cena's stardom, which was a heel that would rock jorts, oversized jerseys, the biggest iced out chains, and say some of the craziest things to his opponent. Shut up.
You remember one thing. She taught you how to suck.
Shut your ass up.
John Cena's untouchable. You just a stupid. You need to hit them sit-ups too. Not exactly leanest. Forget seeing me, bro. You can't see your own penis.
But eventually, the people started catching on to the bid, and thus began one of the greatest babyface runs we've ever seen. John Cena was a worldwide sensation that defied time, generations, and language. However, about 2 years into his run, the crowd started to turn on him. Why is that? It's not like Cena did anything wrong. He was simply following orders, doing good stuff, but that lies the problem. WWE started to create a monster, a hero, a terror known throughout the land as Super Cena. The WWE's vision of a Superman-like creature that saw Cena never lose cleanly. He overcame evil time and time again, and he embodied what has come to be known as the PG era. The product catered more to kids, but in a way that was just so cringy, borderline unwatchable.
Holy fudging mustard!
Holy fudging mustard is crazy.
Put simply, Cena was being shoved up, down, and inside wrestling fans. And many older fans did not like this feeling. They started to see Cena as this corporate puppet that would have gone off without a hitch in the 80s, but the people now grown cynical as a result of the attitude and wisdom.
Big Mama one time. Say hey to your girl.
Don't my surgery any longer. Tonight I leave the WWE.
Say hey to your girl.
Hello, mama.
How you doing, Rose? How you doing?
It's fortunate to protect the audience involved because of Cena became a trend that would go on to affect the trajectory of multiple wrestlers' situations. However, kids felt that over years for Super Cena was combined the type of person they want to be. Couple that with Cena's amazing work with the Make-A-Wish Foundation, and you had a kerfuffle that can only be described best by 5 words.
Make history, but
Y'all see little mama? Y'all see little mama?
Cena era is probably prevalent in how we discuss
Yeah, look at her.
aspect of any story in the history.
Yeah.
you see my daughter in the Carhartt? Yeah, daughter. Yeah, daughter.
No cap.
No,
You
not
being
those.
so very good.
Help describe why certain
Come on,
baby faces
daughter.
and heels work.
Oh,
and
man,
some
look at her.
We need to understand the mechanisms of
Say
storytelling.
bye, cousins.
Don't be scared.
Bye,
I
bye,
know
little
we're pretty
mama.
deep into the video already, but I promise to keep this little intro brief before we get right back to the wrestling. Storytelling themes are essentially the reasons why the story exists. Simple, but it's also where we go wrong a lot of times in discussing and even in the creation of stories. Famous screenwriting instructor Robert story describes how a theme isn't just a topic. It's the artist's argument about the topic expressed through this story. And the key word is argument. So a theme can't just be broad words like brotherhood or forbidden love, but rather statements like anyone can wear the mask and still be themselves. Or the harsh truth is better than comfort and illusion. Or greatness requires brutal sacrifice. Those are arguments. And what makes a story feel satisfying is number 1, how the argument is introduced. Number 2, the counter idea that opposes this argument. Number 3, how they're explored through the character's actions. And number 4, ultimately, how this conflict is paid off. So how does this all translate back to wrestling? Well, the beauty of wrestling is that the vehicle for conflict is literally baked into it. As we all know, at some point, these competitors are going to duke it out in the fight. But what separates the forgettable fusing characters and the amazing, memorable, iconic fusing characters are the arguments which each competitor represents. At the height of the PG era, the things that Cena represented were platitudes, vague concepts that people could project all their troubles onto. However, as a character, Cena didn't have many conflicts that allowed us to explore or even question what it means to really grow, but to live by hustle, loyalty, and respect. And the few times he did were some of the defining moments of the character. Whether it's this amazing promo he cut after losing the title to Sheamus.
You never give up. You pick yourself up. You brush yourself off. You push forward. You
Or his biggest rival, his big character is Edge, the ultimate opportunist, accomplished a lot in the world of WWE by sneaking his way to the top, or using loopholes like the Money in the Bank contract. Or arguably his most intriguing rivalry was with CM Punk, the voice of the voiceless, the second coming of Steve Austin's anti-authoritarianism, but someone that didn't allow it to just be a punchline. What made their feud in 2011 so interesting is how, despite being painted as a heel for his tendency to go off script and make things difficult for the company, Punk can be seen as a rebellious babyface going against corporate loyalty personified. Cena was no longer the relatable underdog from Boston trying to make his way to the top. he became the Yankees, the juggernaut, the actual underdog was sure to become. Robert McKee described the satisfying climax as being both unexpected and inevitable, and when the audience senses the hand of the writer, satisfaction dies. For example, you can safely assume coming into Avengers Endgame that the Avengers will eventually beat Thanos, but you don't expect for it to come at the cost of Tony Stark's life. But for the most part, seeing his matches throughout the 2010s were inevitable and expected. No matter how good the match was, you can literally pinpoint the second that Vince McMahon put his grubby little hands to force his story to its inevitable conclusion. All of which is summed up perfectly in the phrase that was circling all over the wrestling sphere at the time. Cena wins, LOL. This resulted in what many have claimed to be the death of the traditional babyface.
I don't know when it started, but I don't know. Maybe when Edge lost that bitch this season. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know when it started.
The fans would turn on them and simply find a new underdog right to support. Kind of toxic, if you ask me, but also I get it, considering longtime fans were expected to cheer for a man who did what he did to Zack Ryder. Yeah, okay, but for the longest time, with a few exceptions, I came and went. This was just what it was, until wrestling entered its renaissance.
Fly ball very deep to right field. That one is back.
There is no secret that wrestling is currently in a boom period when it comes to business being made, and that is because of a multitude of reasons. The development of social media, moving into a cinematic presentation, or the natural evolution of athleticism and showmanship finally reaching its apex. However, I'd argue that wrestling entered its Renaissance era because of the return of the babyface. There are two I want to highlight. The main characters of their respective companies. See, at WrestleMania 38, Cody Rhodes returned to the WWE, not as the unsure Nepo baby stuck playing Stardust, but reborn as the American Nightmare. Throughout the next 2 years, millions and millions of sons, daughters, fathers, mothers, children, and jaded wrestling fans alike all followed along, even cheered, as Cody Rhodes clashed with the tribal chief Roman Reigns in order to finish his story. Now, what was the story? Well, let's come back to our earlier discussion. At surface level, it's Cody on his quest for the WWE title. Let's go one layer deeper. It's him trying to bring honor back to the Rhodes family name. But at its root, Cody's story is about him trying to prove to the company he left behind, and more importantly to himself, that he's worthy of the expectations placed upon him by his late father, Dusty Rhodes. After his father passed and his frustrations with WWE creative reaching a fever pitch, he ran away from these expectations, leaving the WWE and wrestling on the independent circuit, which at the time was a very, very risky endeavor. And he decided to even one-up that by helping to start a brand new company that would grow into true competition for the WWE. But here he is now, reborn to reclaim what his late father wasn't able to get. And I think that's the note that struck an emotion in all of us when he returned in 2022. The central theme for Cody's story was, am I enough? Yeah, I am. But a story's protagonist is only as good as who they face, and in the other corner was the tribal chief, the head of the table, Roman Reigns. As if aligned by the stars, Roman's character actually provided a great, perfect counter idea for Cody Rhodes, because the question of am I enough is baked into the character. See, because for the previous 2 years when Cody was away, Roman was manipulating his family members and bending the system to his will en route to an iconic title reign. And each step along the way, Roman forced the crowd, his opponents, and even members of his tribe to acknowledge him. Now, despite being a cool way to start and end each promo, the phrase, acknowledge me, carries within it a deep insecurity.
And Roman had said, you know what I really want from Jay? I don't want his love. I have that. I don't want his admiration. I don't even want his obedience. I'll take that from him. You know what I need? I'm the head of the table. I am the tribal chief. I need him to acknowledge me. And the moment he said it, we all got chills. Because we knew this is bigger than this moment. This is the declarative statement. This is the definition of the character. And it's emotional. It's an emotional. You think of all of the popular catchphrases, none of them are emotional. Can you smell what the Rock is cooking? That's not emotional. That's the bottom line because Stone Cold said so. Alpha male statement. You're against The Undertaker, you're going to die die at the hands of the dead man. You know what Roman's catchphrase is? Needy. The most confident performer, the best looking man. He runs the family. He's the biggest star. But he's needy. He needs you to acknowledge him. He needs you to acknowledge him. Unbelievable. It puts people
Shows insecurity to me.
to react any way they want. Acknowledge it. It's not learn to love it. No! No. There's no command. It's a plea. It's a beg. From a man who doesn't beg. From a man who rules. From a man who commands the island of relevancy.
How did we get here? See, Roman's WWE stint got off to a red-hot start as a member of The Shield, which was essentially the wrestling world's Backstreet Boys. However, as soon as they split and the company chose to invest in Roman as the face of the company, the fans rejected it. So to see Cody Rhodes, someone who represented rebellion and disruption, come back to the company and instantly get the love Roman has always wanted, it's like the people choosing Daniel Bryan over him all over again, and is what makes him the perfect heel and one of the definitive matchups of modern wrestling. There are many aspects that made this feud so damn captivating. The fact that both of them were born into wrestling royalty, that Dusty Rhodes had actually trained Roman Reigns, or even the involvement of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, which elevated this from a wrestling storyline to a worldwide phenomenon showcasing how nepotism and legacy can be taken advantage of. The other main character of wrestling was Hangman Adam Page, who represents a similar theme of questioning his self-worth as Cody Rhodes, but his story was more subtle, a little more nuanced, because Hangman's story was about what if your greatest enemy was yourself. Because despite being touted as the cowboy of AEW, his storyline actually deconstructed the archetype and image of the cowboy. Stoic, smooth, silent. Hangman had breakdowns, often, whether it be because of his alcoholism, or his anxiety, or his insecurity and loneliness.
I lost to Jericho, I lost to Pac, and then it felt like I started to lose a hell of a lot more. I lost my confidence, and truthfully, I lost myself.
He isolated himself, not in a way that seemed cool and mysterious, but in a way that seemed sad.
I've done the group thing before.
Man, what the fuck is going on?
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Little by little, through the belief of the people, held by allowing himself to be vulnerable and let other people in, he was not only able to finally prove to himself and the whole world that he is enough, but he was able to redefine what it meant to do some cowboy shit.
But the one thing that it felt like, for whatever reason, that I never seemed to lose, the one thing that grew week after week, that got just a little bit louder, was these people chanting cowboy shit. To me, that's very real. Cowboy shit was learning to let the past live in the past and accept new friends into my life. And cowboy shit was taking my chance and putting it on the line to stick my neck out for those friends who stuck their necks out for me so many times. And cowboy shit was having the balls in the middle of the hottest run of my career to turn around and go back home to be there for the birth of a beautiful baby boy. That's cowboy shit. When you fall off, you get back up, you get back on the horse, you keep riding, blazing on ahead, because to me, that is cowboy shit. I'm not going to predict how full gear will end for me. But despite that brutal honesty, I feel like you all still believe in me. And for the first time in my life, I do too. So the promise I can make is that at full gear, I will give you everything. I will give you my heart. I will give you my soul. I will give you every fiber of my being. I will give you my blood. I will give you my sweat. And one way or the other, I feel like I may give you my tears. The one thing, though, that I am 100% sure about is that at full gear, I will give you cowboy shit.
Hangman made cowboy shit not about being a lone cowboy that doesn't feel fear, but rather someone who feels the fear and saddles up anyways. And in return, people chose him every single time. That's what I love about wrestling and why I call it art. You take two storylines that cover similar topics of self-worth and self-idealization, but two entirely different takes on it. One journey is an epic tale with twists and swerves and the highest of highs in terms of emotional grandeur and national coverage. Meanwhile, the other was more contemplative and intentional, true exploration into the crafty son of a bitch that is depression. One is Rocky, the other is Raging Bull. Where Cody's story was more about fulfilling a destiny to prove that he's enough, Paige's story was about overcoming his fears and insecurities and learning that he is enough. Both are fantastic examples of what wrestling can be when done right. And most importantly, they help prove that you didn't have to be a bad guy to be entertaining and well received. That maybe being good is enough. And this era has truly become the babyface era. Whether you're talking about the gothic dominatrix goddess that is Rhea Ripley, or the amazing character work that the one timeless Toni Storm is doing, who I'd love to make a video about at some point. You also have the passionate Sami Zayn, the nonchalant Orange Cassidy, or our Lord and Savior Io Sky, who returned the face purely off the strength of her wrestling ability and natural charisma. Hell, Roman Reigns, who I just got done painting as the final boss antagonist of Cody Rhodes' story, is currently working as a babyface and never even properly turned face. His fans simply gaslighted, turned him. Meanwhile, on the heel side of things, you have all kinds, all different shapes and sizes. You have the sadistically juvenile MJF, the modern-day Joker and Harley Quinn couple that is Seth Rollins and Becky Lynch, the maniacal Naomi, or the living Looney Tune cartoons that are Solo Sikoa and Chelsea Green. As long as you can get booze, as long as you can get heat, it works. You see, traditionally a heel is one that relies on doing whatever it takes to retain their ego. But what happens when the heel is telling now one lie? What happens when their bitterness, their resentment, their sense of betrayal is the truth? At least from a certain point of view. You start to see the rise of an entirely new heel, one that causes us to question our baby faces, the crowd that boos them, and the moral spectrum of wrestling as a whole. The heel who is right, and look no further than Drew McIntyre, the Scottish warrior, the internet troll, the chosen. See, in 2019, Drew McIntyre was the star of a generational babyface run, eventually winning the 2020 Royal Rumble and securing a chance to finish his story. However, COVID happened, leading to him winning the title and at the arena. This would become indicative of what Drew's character would become. His greatness would get him close to living his dream, but then something would get in the way. Whether it was a worldwide pandemic, heel shenanigans, or eventually his ego. His heel turn was one that was built gradually, brick by brick, with solid and understandable rationale. Kevin Owens is another heel who falls into this category.
You team with the guy who tried to end my career, who tried to take away the one thing I've loved since I was 11 years old. He tried to take my livelihood, and you teamed with him. So yeah, everything that's happened is your fault.
And I think that's where wrestling has gotten even more complicated, because here's the thing. We've seen a lot of wrestling, like a lot of it, some of which has worked, and some that has failed miserably. So when someone comes along, commits to being a heel and nails it night after night, you start to root for them. Instead of being an asshole, they become your asshole. Enter Dominic Mysterio, whose stale babyface run pivoted into him shockingly turning on his father Rey Mysterio, the greatest luchador wrestler of all time, and aligning himself with the heel faction called the Judgment Day. Fast forward 3 years later, and despite him turning on damn near everyone he aligns himself with, WrestleMania 41 in Vegas sounded like this. It circles back to a topic I alluded to before, and is, to be honest, the real reason I wanted to make this video. That wrestling somehow, in some way, always finds a way to reflect the society of its time. Sami Zayn recently made some statements about WWE's current attitude in avoiding political themes and exchanging his statements. Wrestling is a reflective art form. But now I think in a strange way, we're doing some sort of weird anti-reflection inflection, where we just simply don't touch politics. As a company, nothing about the political climate is reflected in the product anymore. WWE is meant to be an escape from all that stuff, especially when people feel it in their day-to-day lives. Now, I tend to respect Sammy's stance on world views, but I have to disagree with Sammy's take here, because in a way, the WWE's treatments of its characters and overall passivity towards politics, despite continuously displaying the alignment of the current administration, is in and of itself a reflection of today's society. Whether by design or happenstance, what the WWE is doing is leaning into how scatterbrained the world feels nowadays. Not to say that the world's never been this divided, it's always been divided, but we just simply didn't have as many outlets to broadcast information or misinformation all around the world. And that very same development of all these different voices chattering in our ear also spawned these echo chambers that social media plays a say, leading to a rising radicalization and toxic discourse. And it's not just wrestling that has changed, it's everything. Politics, religion, fandom. People pick and choose what aligns with them in the moment. Someone might share one party's beliefs but reject the rest, or call themselves spiritual but not religious. The same thing is happening in wrestling. Fans don't cheer for the hero because he's good or for the villain because he's bad. They root for whoever they think, no matter what they do. Or his signature and still get a standing ovation. Yeah, he can manipulate his own family and still get called a tribal chief like it's a badge of honor.
Get on my face.
Yes, there's a general line in the sand that separates the baby faces and the heels, but that line no longer limits us to cheering the heroes and booing the villains. What matters most is who the most compelling character is to you. And even that is not entirely true. You have tribalist fans for WWE and AEW that will twerk for their favorite company and get the same old-tired rhetoric to ridicule the other. You have fans of specific styles of wrestling, or ride-or-die fans of specific wrestlers in spite of what they may be doing anymore. And you see that with Hangman in particular, that despite how wrong he may be at times, or how he might, I don't know, burn someone's childhood home down, they still cheer him up. But let's go back to how we started.
You don't want me to rap and to sleep.
The John Cena heel turn. The problem with John Cena's heel run was that there was no overarching story. That's because this wasn't a decision born out of creativity, or rather out of what was best for business. The problem was that six moments that came too few and too far between. It never felt like any other last. As revealed by the last community that turned heel in Toronto, The Rock was brought on because of low ticket sales for the Elimination Chamber PLE, which started a chain of conversations leading to the infamous heel turn. To their credit, for the last 10 minutes of the Elimination Chamber PLE, the world stood still and watched a man turn his back on the values that he's been preaching for almost 20 years, and how the storytelling possibilities are endless. What do you do afterwards? But what we got was inconsistent character with 2 hours later.
Geez, you guys know, I don't want to ruin wrestling. I love wrestling.
ChatGPT has booking, Travis Scott appearance, an anticlimactic turn back to the good side before SummerSlam, and ultimately, a long-anticipated heel run that left a lot to be desired, and valid questions over whether good or bad even mattered to him. Oh, and millions of merchandise sold across the nation, because at the end of the day,
it comes down basically to one thing. Business. It was good for business.
The failure of Cena's heel run isn't the end-all be-all of wrestling. I guess it gets to the root of this whole video. What is wrestling's greatest heel ultimately? Well, before we get to that, let's come back to this conversation about baby faces and heels one last time. Are the concepts of baby faces and heels dead? No. This dynamic is what makes the magic.
Got the strikeout looking. Huge K there.
Now that the designated
runner at third, one away. Coming up to the dish for Biloxi, Xavier Warren. Swing, soft line drive. Play is made, 2 out.
now batting, the first baseman, Wes Clark.
Hello? Can anyone hear me?
Every time up, he was a threat, and he gave them a shot at the win. Impressive showing for sure.
in the mid-90s, the so-called West.
Every time I open that spreadsheet, my soul left my body. I have that too, but I switched to
I keep showing that.
This is how I always pictured sales in my head.
how it can be so organized.
Leave spreadsheets behind. Discover Pipedrive Sales with CRM.
There are very few comedians who seem to have been as intertwined with the hip-hop generation as Aries Spears. This is in no small part due to the fact that the New Jersey comic doesn't only love rap music, but is never shy about expressing his impassioned opinions on it whenever he gets the opportunity.
Are you out of your fucking mind? Not only is he one of the best lyricists ever, but again, you talking about words to truth. I'm not a businessman. I'm a businessman. That's one of the coldest lines ever, because it's true. Jada gets like 85% of their vibes. Dry. Hope is telling the truth lyrically. He's not with Hope. As far as being Kendrick, no. Lyrically, no. Drake from a showmanship in terms of the brand, Drake, okay. But bar for bar, no.
That's without even getting into the fact that when it comes to impersonating rappers, there's been few people doing it at his level over the years. And courtesy of his now regular appearances on Black TV, we're now getting more opportunities to hear his thoughts on hip-hop than ever before. But Spears isn't a man that promotes much, and it's no surprise that not everyone is always going to be delighted about what he has to say, especially with that New York bias that he's known to have, which had some people threatening to confiscate his hip-hop titles.
The Clips, rapper, yeah.
Jog my memory.
I know Pusha T and Alice. Never heard of Brian? You don't know about this? You really a hip-hop fan of Clips?
I'm not
Around with their stuff? You don't know who this is?
I'm not a fan of rappers who like play the ukulele in the park and walk around with their bare feet. I'm not into earthy.
The Clips are not earthy.
They not.
Rap. They're like the kings of like driven rap.
Oh, excuse me.
You not know who the Clips are?
That's probably don't.
In fact, there are times when he even straight up eviscerates artists without the slightest regard for the fact that they might become aware of his opinion. And in certain instances, they even let it be known that they've got smoke for him. It's your boy Luis, and these are the many victims of Aries Spears. Because of his savage crowd work and uncensored material, Aries is used to saying big, bold things on stage with a fearlessness that can only be commended. And because of this skill set, Aries has no problem taking on any rapper. At one point, he even extended this to dissing an entire nation's hip-hop scene. This is, of course, when Aries aired out his issues with UK rap, despite the fact that British MCs have been making major waves for years, and artists such as Dave, Central C, Stormzy, and Skepta have made inroads to the UK market. Aries simply wasn't having any of it at all, and in the process, it turned out a crazy impersonation, which detailed exactly what he didn't like about it.
But I can't stand listening to niggas from London rap. When you call me, they come, and you go, you go, and you go, that shit sounds ridiculous. Everything ain't for everybody. I mean, just because it's there don't mean everybody should touch it. When I call them to the street, and they go, want to say to me, that shit sounds ridiculous.
Immediately, this clip went viral, and even led to remixes on TikTok that were unironically kinda hard.
I can't stand listening to niggas from London rap. Come off the hill, go talk me, go talk me, when you call me, go, when you go, when you go, when you go, when you go.
Unsurprisingly, this garnered a mixed response, with some UK hip-hop heads taking issue just as certain US fans felt that he'd said what they've been thinking all along. Dismantled their style, made fun of him, and improved him. He listens to the worst example, then comes up to the conclusion that we're all like him. Comedians need material, I get it. But this did nothing to discourage Aries or prompt him to educate himself on hip-hop. And since then, he just won't relent in trying to shred the entire British scene.
I saw something you were talking about on the rap music. Have you heard that? You know, I'm probably like it was a huge detriment to myself because the UK loves me. Oh, I got so many people. And when you come into the UK, but the way I be dumping on them, man, them rappers is horrible, man. Oh, it's all in the ball, in the pop, and the beautiful, beautiful, everything is everything is everybody, yo. That is garbage.
When it comes to Aries, this seems to be the way that he operates. As once something he says goes viral or picks up traction, he can become like a dog with a bone. A clear-cut case of this happening went down recently when he embarked on a high-profile war of words with a true West Coast legend. In hip-hop culture, the vast majority of people have heralded former NWA member and all-around great Ice Cube as a true tie-in and paved the way for much of what was to come and has made the genre great. Well, it turns out that it's really everyone except Aries Spears, who has gradually revealed his true feelings on the MC turned actor to the point that they've now got real beef. Up until recently, Spears had previously been more measured in his evaluation of Q, simply claiming that he didn't compare to people like Biggie Smalls as a storyteller.
But today was a good day. It's one of the most story records, hip hop. I mean,
Fuck out of here! Niggas Bleed puts everything to rest. It's over. Niggas Bleed is Terrence Crawford versus Ice Cube's Errol Spence. And listen, again, I'm from New York, so I know people gonna come up with all that New York bias. And fuck that. Listen to the track. The way Biggie tells that story with that melody behind it, that music behind it, the way it builds to a crescendo, it literally felt like he was watching a scene that could have been a Martin Scorsese movie.
On other occasions, he was confused by some of the roles he landed in Hollywood, given his stature and lack of muscle tone.
When Ice Cube did the Vin Diesel movie, listen, Triple X, Ice Cube is a little chunky man. He built like a propane tank. Action stars look like The Rock, Jason Statham, Stallone and Schwarzenegger in the 80s. Right. Or even if you go with a guy like Bruce Willis may not have had the necessary physique, but he was the everyman's man. The kind of guy you know, you sit in a bar, crack open a beer, and might break it over your head if you disrespect him. You have to look at people.
But things really came to a head when Aries claimed that he had never been a fan in any way, shape, or form, and basically implied that he was extremely overrated.
Ice Cube does nothing for me as a rapper and an actor. Okay, nothing. The song that makes me want to jump out of a window is Have a Good Day. Today was a good day, rolling down the street with my 6'4", police didn't come bottles no more. That's not the lyrics. Whatever, but that you might as well have them say green eggs and ham. Sam, I am.
In turn, things got so heated that he was called out by other legends like Willie D of Ghetto Boys for speaking ill of a great.
You know, Willie D called me. I was in Louisville, Kentucky, and I love Willie D, that's my man. But this nigga called me like I disrespected his mama. He was like, Aries, man, you don't understand what Ice Cube done did for the culture, man, and hip-hop. Why you say? And I go, Willie, it's a subjective opinion. I'm allowed to not like Ice Cube. I know, man, but Aries, man, he was on me.
If there's one thing everyone knows about Cube, it's that he's not exactly going to withstand insults like that and not say anything. And when asked about Aries' comments, he responded to the slander with some insults of his own.
Aries Spears, yeah. He said there's nothing that's here to me. This one on its way. Did you hear what he said? What did he say? He said it was nothing about you impresses him. From movies to rapping, nothing at all. Some you we don't like. You know what I'm saying? Like the people that you don't like, they come from that. That's cool though. Everybody got their opinion, and they all stink. You know what I'm saying? So at the end of the day, it's cool. You know, he entitled to his opinion. It's the feeling is mutual. You know, I don't think he's on anybody's list of top 10 comedians. You know what I mean? Black catch me for sure.
In the aftermath, he hit back again, and inferred that he didn't like how he had been characterized in the whole exchange, claiming that it made it worse than it was.
Am I not allowed to have an opinion and voice it? Because if it's not in the direction of everybody else, if you don't know who I am, how do you know if I'm funny or not? So you can't have it both ways. And for the record, I respect Ice Cube, the man. I respect Ice Cube in terms of what he's brought to the game. He's one of the pioneers. So hats off to him for that. I just said I wasn't a fan of his artistry. I never attacked him as a man. I never attacked him in terms of his character. I said I wasn't a fan of his artistry. Why am I not allowed to feel that way? Why is that?
But it's not exactly played out well for him in the eyes of the average viewer, as many think that he got in his feelings about it a little. The same reason why when somebody don't think you're funny, you get salty. Why do you think Cube is hating? You gave your opinion, he gave his. Now, the image that he's being petty and holding a grudge about the whole thing isn't exactly dying down, because at the minute, he's delighting in the fact that Ice Cube's new film, which was a recent adaptation of the classic book The War of Worlds, has majorly flopped.
It was just about me talking about my opinion. A lot of people set the world results to me. Yeah, and my Instagram was like, oh, now I'm about to have to feel this shit. Feel that right, vindication. And like I said, that was never my objective.
This is a common thread for Aries when it comes to his self-appointed enemies, because once he decides that someone's fallen afoul of his standards, he will savor every slip-up they make. And one person he got the chance to do that with, at least briefly, was Lizzo. Although many of his foes were guys in hip-hop, Aries hasn't been shy about coming after women either. Over the years, he's had harsh words for everyone, from Foxy Brown and Iggy Azalea to Kyromlb.
Foxy looked like the inside of her bra steak.
Listen, Foxy don't like me. She told me to suck her dick recently.
She told you to suck her dick?
Yes.
And that's part of my issue. I believe she has it.
Although, whatever he has said about them pales in comparison to his war against Lizzo, as that's one lady he's taken repeated shots at, and in every instance, it hasn't been about her music or anything else. Instead, it's all been fixated on her appearance.
I can't get past the fact that she looks like a shit emoji. Very beautiful girl. She's got a very pretty face, but she keeps showing her body on picture. Like, come on, man. I'm sorry, listen, I ain't the most in-shape nigga in the world, but I still, you know, when you funny and you got swagger and confidence and you decent looking, I think I'm at least handsome, you get pussy. But a woman that's built like a plate of mashed potatoes is in trouble.
From there, he didn't let go, as he then went off on body confidence as a whole.
You know what kills me about women is the hypocrisy and the contradiction. Yes, queen, slay queen, yes, queen, slay. Yeah, girl, you confident. Fuck diabetes, fuck heart disease. Cholesterol. Y'all claim womanhood and about sisterhood and support me as sister. You know, when it comes to that ridiculous shit. But if you really gave a fuck, why wouldn't you go, black girl, we love you, confident. But this ain't it. That's the real love. Y'all will jump on me for making jokes, but y'all won't fucking be real and go, sister, put the eclair down. This ain't it. It's treadmill time.
Instantly, this comment made major commotion, and while some people were able to find humor in it, others felt like it was a case of the pot and calling the kettle black. This man looks from left to right and wants to talk about Lizzo's size, when he looks like he's 2 cheeseburgers away from a cardiac episode. I know a Y chromosome, with a face only a mother could love, isn't talking. The persistent debate over what was said clearly reached Lizzo's ears too, prompting her to make a little jibe of her own at the VMAs as she accepted an award.
And now, to the bitches that got something to say about me in the press, you know what? I'm not gonna say nothing. They be like, Lizzo, why don't you clap back? Why don't you clap back? Cause bitch, I'm winning, ho.
But according to Aries, this certainly didn't bother him at all.
The guy asked me specifically about her music, and then I went totally left. And people have to understand 2 things. Number one, no matter what, this badge that I wear called comedy, I want this thick and this oath that I'm taking called humor. I don't betray it. And this is how this works. When you're a public figure and you do the things like that Lizzo does, where you come to a Laker game and you show your whole ass in front of children and families, you are fodder for jokes.
Kyromlb presents Shade All Things. First animated sample with Philips Kyromlb 360.
And now,
Oh,
It's like a difference maker for them in this one. They took the got a nice jump in
ExxonMobil is unleashing the power of the world's smallest molecule by planning to build the world's largest low-carbon hydrogen production facility. By 2050, we're driving our emissions toward net zero. We can achieve a smaller carbon footprint.
Inspired by a true story.
My name's Sarah.
You can call me Bert. A girl's ambition.
I got a
A corporation's greed.